So the title of this event, when it was being promoted and everything, is God, Trump, and the Future of America. So, I mean, basically...
Trump would probably like to switch the order of those.
Yes.
But nevertheless...
I would like to remove one of them.
God, I know. Trump too?
No, remove one from the discussion. The other one, I don't need to remove because I don't have any reason to think he exists, but the discussion is good.
Well, don't you make your life talking about him?
I do spend a lot of time talking about him.
It'd be like if I've spent my life talking about unicorns.
It would be, except that you don't live in a world where the overwhelming majority of people believe in unicorns and are trying to legislate what other people can do based on what they think unicorns want.
Sachi, what is, since we're into it.
This is how it goes.
Yeah. What is a specific, concrete example of someone trying to do that?
Of trying to...
well, somebody who says, God told me X, and I want you, Matt, therefore, to do Y.
Oh, it's
Who says that? Who takes that position that you're spending your life fighting?
Sure. So are we in any way suggesting that there's not a particularly loud and well-financed fundamentalist religious right who are stacking the courts in accordance with their ideology, which is influenced by their religious things? I have family members who are primarily single-issue voters. Like, if there's two candidates and one is set out to end abortion and the other one's not, that's the only thing that matters to them. And so I think it puts people in a position where they're probably voting against their own best interests.
Can you name, just pursuing this to see what we're talking about, can you name a single Supreme Court justice who, in your opinion, does not arrive at their judgments for any constitutional or jurisprudential or moral or philosophical reason, but simply consults a divine oracle in order to make a ruling? Can you name one of them?
Oh, no. I'm not in any way suggesting people don't genuinely have these beliefs. It's just that if people's views, like people within all of them, whether they're Supreme Court justices or not, they're going to have particular views on how the way the world's going to work. You and I are. And
sure.
There are people, I have no idea if you're one of them, there are people whose view on how the world should work should be, everything should be working in accordance with my understanding of this deity.
Well, let's take an example, because I think the discussion can become kind of airy if we don't pin it down.
Okay.
Let's talk about abortion.
Sure.
Okay. Did you know, for example, that Christopher Hitchens was pro-life?
I know, for example, that Christopher Hitchens was not pro-life.
Well,
he was. So there's two different aspects of this. First of all, it doesn't matter what Hitchens believed in the first place, but he wasn't in favor of making it illegal. And my primary issue when it comes to like abortion is the legality, not whether or not somebody thinks it's immoral or not.
I interviewed Hitchens years ago for a magazine, and we talked about this issue. And he made what I thought was an interesting point coming from an atheist perspective, which was, he said, look, it's one thing if you say that you believe in Hindu reincarnation in which we have many different lives, or if you believe that there is a life to come in which if you happen to be terminated in the womb, you're going to go to life everlasting. He goes, I don't believe any of that. I believe we have one life. This is it. This is the only one. And so ultimately, it is the greatest value. And if you have a life that is coming into being and it's snuffed out, all its choices interrupted at the outset, he goes, you got to think before you do that, right? Now, let's leave the legality issue, because I think the abortion debate has become radicalized since Hitchens died. Whether Hitchens would have supported late-term abortion, we don't really know. But what I'm trying to say is that here's Hitchens.
And I don't really care.
You don't really care. But the point I'm trying to make is this. You're saying that religious people apply a worldview. And I'm saying you do too. Hitchens does too. All of us have a worldview.
I think I just said that like 3 minutes ago. The issue is whether or not, so if somebody's saying that their worldview is right because it comes from the divine, and there's no demonstration that A, there is anything divine, or that they have any good understanding of what the divine would want, then I would hope that we would agree that that is at least a fallacious appeal to an authority that can't be demonstrated.
Well, but I would argue that first of all, none of us in America conducts a voting test in which when somebody comes into the booth and decides, for example, why do you want to have an abortion? Someone could say, because it's fun. Someone could say, because I think it's a form of birth control. Someone could say, in other words, what I'm trying to get at is we don't conduct a rational scrutiny test to make sure that people who vote about climate change, if someone says, I believe in climate change, I'm like, don't you own a house that's on the water? Yes, you do. Has that house gone down in value? No. Now, if
is that the test for whether?
No. What I'm trying to say
Okay.
is we don't subject people's political views to a scrutiny in which we ask, are there irrational?
In what way?
Well, let's say somebody says.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Well, you're saying that when it comes to religious believers, right?
Right.
There's a compartment that they have. Let's call it the divine compartment.
For some of them, sure.
Right. And so they appeal to this, from your point of view, irrational source. And they try to import that source into politics, which according to you is fallacious. They shouldn't be doing that. And I'm saying all kinds of people who are not religious say the wackiest things.
But
and
that's
have
a
the
two-bouquet fallacy. That's whataboutism. I would object to anybody doing things on behalf of irrational reasons. I'm just saying that
So you would like to see our democratic process purified of the irrational.
I would like to see our universe purified of the irrational.
Okay, and how would you go about doing that?
Education, by actually teaching people not only critical thinking, but logic and fallacies, so that instead of believing something when they don't have a good reason, they reserve belief until they do have a good reason. You shouldn't believe anything until the evidence actually supports it. Now, you're going to get into arguments about how much evidence is enough, or, do I have enough evidence for this? But we've been, on the God subject, I mean, I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day, and it's like, what is the evidence for God? What is the reason that anybody should believe there's a God at all?
Okay.
And so far, despite countless debates, nobody seems to have come up with a sound reason for that, and yet they go 10 steps further, which is not only is there a God, but it's this God, and my understanding of this God, and this is how we interact, and the Bible is the true guidebook, or the Quran is the true guidebook, and the question then becomes, we have a proposition, any proposition, whether it's God or climate change or whatever, how do we go about determining whether or not that proposition is reasonable to accept?
Okay.
And on the God front, maybe you have something better than anybody else has come up with. What is the reasonable warrant for accepting that there's a God at all?
Okay, let me try to answer that. I start with the fact that here we are flung into the world with no clear understanding of A, where the universe came from, not the earth, but the universe. B, why we're here and what the purpose of our life is. And C, what, if anything, happens to us after we die. I would argue that, so we are in a very peculiar position. We're human beings, we're flung into the world, and the three of the most important questions we could possibly ask, we have no answer to. Now
I'm going to
hold
agree
on.
with you.
Do you agree or you not agree?
I'm going to agree with you on two of the three. The middle one, on purpose, I think assumes there's a purpose that there's been no demonstration there's a purpose to it.
What, if any, purpose we have for our
Sure.
life? Okay, so now we are in agreement that on the three cardinal questions, we are in a certain kind of blindness. We're in a certain kind of blind ignorance because we don't know, correct?
So I don't. So if we start you're saying we're flung into this universe without an understanding of the origin of the universe, the purpose of life, or what happens afterwards.
Right, where the universe came from,
Yes.
who, if anyone, or
Sure.
what made it, if anyone. B, what the purpose of our life is, if any. And C, what, if anything, happens to us after we die.
We are in violent agreement right now.
Perfect. Now, the second question arises, what does science have to say about these three questions? Can science either now, and if it can't now, settle these matters in the future? Let's look at them one by one. Let's take them in reverse order.
Sure.
Can science decide the matter of whether or not there is life after death, yes or no?
It depends.
Depends on what?
So science only deals with the natural world.
Correct.
And so if in fact there's a supernatural existence after this, then it may forever be beyond the purview of science.
Correct. Or if there is another universe that operates according to different laws and we happen to move somehow into that universe, science would have nothing to say about it, correct?
Not necessarily, because
Okay.
if it's a natural, like we have like hypotheses about a multiverse or whatever.
Correct.
I can't say what science will be able to test for in the future, or whether or not we are permanently confined to the cosmos that we experience. I can't say. I can't even rule out, I can't say that science could never say anything about the supernatural. All I can say is that as it stands right now, I'm unaware of any supernatural claim that has any evidence for it that science could evaluate to determine that it was true.
Right. Let's put it a little differently because I don't want to debate the detail here. I just want to look at the macro picture. And what I'm basically saying is Shakespeare said, I think correctly, death is the undiscovered country. No one has been to the other side of the curtain and essentially reported, given us empirical evidence one way or the other, correct? We don't know what happens after death. True?
See, here's the thing, and I promise I'm not being difficult. This is just for clarity. As a skeptic, my position is not, like when the psychics who claim that they're speaking with the dead.
Right.
My position is not, they're wrong and that's bullshit. My position is, they cannot demonstrate that what they're actually doing is what they claim. And so I can't say, nobody's been to the other side and communicated back. I can just say there's no reliable evidence for it, and I don't know what shape that evidence would take in order to demonstrate that.
Okay, I want to come back to that because that you've now made to me a very striking claim, namely that we should, I think you're saying, disbelieve all claims for which there is not sufficient evidence.
So,
not just that we should take an agnostic position, but we should disbelieve them. That's two different things.
Oh, so if you mean disbelieve as in believe they are not true, that's the exact opposite of what I just said.
Okay.
What I said was we should believe things when there's evidence for it, and that is both the proposition that the supernatural is real and the proposition that the supernatural is not real.
Okay.
So agnosticism isn't some middle ground between believing X and believing not X. There is no middle ground. You are either convinced of X or you are not convinced of X. And I'm not convinced that the supernatural is real. That doesn't mean that I'm convinced that the supernatural isn't real. It's kind of like if you go into a courtroom,
Okay.
I may have to say not guilty, even if I'm not convinced of innocence, because the burden of proof is on the claim of guilt. And so the people who say, I have good evidential warrant to believe in the supernatural, have adopted a burden of proof, and they have to meet it. And until they do, I am not convinced.
Okay, but let's be clear about what that burden of proof is, because I'm not saying I have definitive proof that God exists or these are his attributes. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't know if there is a God in the sense of no. I'd call myself a believer. Now, right away, we distinguish between a believer and a knower, right?
Sure.
It's an important
Knowledge is a
distinction.
subset of belief.
I believe there's a place called Papua New Guinea because I trust maps and I've studied about it. But I know my brother. I wouldn't say I believe I have a brother because I know the guy. So knowledge.
Are you saying you don't know that there's a Papua New Guinea?
No, I'm saying I know it in the sense that I accept the authorities from which I learn about it.
Sure.
I trust it.
Well,
and if
for
I went
clarity,
there,
it's not just relying on authority. It's actual evidence. So you have a belief in a proposition.
right?
Whether or not it qualifies as knowledge is a separate question because knowledge is a subset of belief. In philosophy, it would be justified true belief. I tend to use a more kind of colloquial because I'm a dilettante. I'm an uneducated oaf who just talks a lot. But if you have a proposition and you accept that it's true, that's all I mean when I say I believe it. You either accept it or you don't. If I say I know it, all we generally mean, all most people mean when they say I know something is that they really, 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 really believe it. They're talking about the confidence level that they have in that proposition that it is likely true. And when we say I know something, generally we're saying, I believe this to the extent that it would be worldview altering to discover it was wrong. And so I believe there's a Papua New Guinea. I would actually argue that I know, I have evidential warrant that there's a Papua New Guinea without actually ever having been there. This is, people used to do the, you don't know there's an Australia. Well, I do now because I've been there. But even before I was there, I think that I had evidential warrant for it.
Yeah, but okay, I agree with that. And I know that there's a Papua New Guinea in that sense. Let's take a different example. Let's say I were to tell you I'm from India. Okay? You have no reason to doubt me. You probably believe I'm from India.
Yeah.
Now, you don't actually know that.
It depends on what you mean by know.
Well,
and it
are you
also-
100% sure?
No, is 100% certainty required for knowledge?
Not necessarily, but
I would
what's
agree.
your bar?
So I don't think you can be 100% certain about anything,
Okay.
which is why I abandon the notion of certainty, which is why when I talk about knowledge, I talk about it as a subset of belief and it is a confidence level. But also, I genuinely don't really, I'm unimpressed when someone says they know something, because we don't wait till we have knowledge to act. We act in accordance with our beliefs, and whether or not your belief rises to the level of knowledge doesn't change what your action's going to be.
All right. So let's sort of circle back to where I was going with the three big questions. And I think
We started with death.
you were in violent agreement that the cause, that we don't know, the cause of the universe, we don't know any prescribed purpose for our lives. We try to discover it, but we don't know it. And we don't know what happens after death.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that anything does, but I definitely would agree. We don't know.
Fair enough. Now, let me ask you this question. What do you do about belief when you are in exactly this position? If something is true, it would have tremendous implications. For example, you would concede that if there was life after death, that would greatly affect the way we think about life on Earth now.
It would.
Depending on what that life looked like.
And depending on whether or not anything in this life had any impact on that life.
Correct. But
right. Yes.
So let's just say if the religious narratives are correct, and there is some sort of cosmic justice in which, let's just say, the crimes that are the undiscovered crimes of this life have to be accounted for in a future life, we would probably have to start thinking about all the stuff that we get away with in private, because even though we escape human accounting, there would be some sort of presumably divine accounting. So in other words, all I'm trying to establish is that there's a relevance to these questions, even if we don't definitively know anything about them, anything about the answer matters which way we go.
I agree the answer matters. It's just that the answer right now is, I don't know. And you can play the what if game for any one of them. What if there's nothing? What if it's the end? What if there's a being who's going to judge you based on whether or not you fell for things without sufficient evidence? What if that's the criteria?
Okay, so what you seem to say is, I think about something, and if I really can't answer the question, right, I take the default position that that something doesn't exist until evidence shows up that's going to convince me it does.
Of course.
That's your view.
That is sound epistemology. That accepting,
sound epistemology according to whom? According to you.
Sure. We'll just go according to me, because I don't need to cite anybody else.
Right.
Because I'm right. Because
okay, hold on. Let's see if you're right. Let's see if you're right.
The alternative would be to say that I'm justified in believing something before there's sufficient evidence for it.
But I would argue that you do that every day. Let's give you a cardinal example.
But that doesn't change the fact whether I should.
You should. I'm saying you do.
We're all
going
to make mistakes.
You do and you should. Look, our life is always lived in anticipation of an unknown future, right? You're dating a woman.
Yes.
And so what you do is, you, being a very reasonable guy, plug in all this data, right, about this woman, and you're trying to make a rational decision, let's say, is this the woman I want to spend my life with? Let's assume you're thinking about that question.
For the sake of your argument, we'll assume I'm thinking about that.
Okay. Now, I would argue that in reality, given the way human beings are, you could never really know what life with this person is going to be like, let's just say over the next 30 years. First of all, you'll be different people in 10 years, or different people in 30 years. So this question about what it's going to be like is unanswerable with any high degree of certainty, correct?
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I, unlike many religions, actually support the notion of divorce, and am opposed to the notion that there's a soulmate out there that you're going to be everything to forever. If we're both in agreement that we don't know what the future holds, I don't make a decision
but
to
if
say...
you'll pardon me, that's a tediously predictable response. I'm not going there. Where I'm going with is the fact...
I didn't think you were going there.
No, because... Right. Where I'm really going with is the fact that in making a decision of whether or not to be with this person, yes or no, you are necessarily taking a huge leap of faith.
No.
No.
No. See, that's the thing. The way I operate my life, and maybe I'm a weirdo, is, so for example, in this case, I have no plans to end this relationship, and neither does she, but we are both adults, And there were 2 rules. Be honest, have fun. That's it. That's all. Be honest, enjoy life. And as long as we're both honest, we can reevaluate the nature of our relationship at any point. I am friends with every one of my exes, including my ex-wife, who I just spoke to. We went into it with this optimism that perhaps we would spend the rest of our lives together, and with the realistic notion that it doesn't happen. Anybody who, the divorce rate's 50 some odd %, anybody who goes into a marriage now thinking, we're never gonna get divorced, is already in opposition with the actual data. And so I, as a huge proponent of David Hume, one of my favorite quotes from him, is that the wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. So my confidence in any proposition, including this particular relationship lasting until I die, is based on whatever data I have. I don't have some delusion that some other people want to run around with. I've found the person and we're definitely going to be together forever because life is uncertain. And it seems that rather than engaging in that self-deception, I'm fine saying, this is what I hope happens. I hope that I am with you for the rest of my life. I hope that, or for the rest of our lives or whatever, but I don't have an unrealistic expectation.
But don't you make plans?
Sure, I make plans for tomorrow because that's the pragmatic.
You don't buy insurance, you don't build homes, you don't make plans, you don't put money into a 401k, and you don't put money into educational funds.
Yes.
You do. Right. So in other words,
that's because I have a reasonable confidence based on data about how long I'm likely to live and what benefits are likely to be rewarded from there.
Based on
not an exercise of faith.
Let me ask you this.
Because what you're talking about is confidence in the absence of certainty. But my confidence is proportional to the evidence. The fact that there isn't certainty about the future doesn't mean that it's an exercise of faith.
I'm saying that the evidence you're invoking is bogus, because according to you, if the divorce rate were 5%, you would make lifetime plans, because according to you, there's a much higher chance, 95% probability.
No, that's not remotely what I said.
Well, it is kind of what you said.
I would make lifetime plans because I hope to have a lifetime, not because what the divorce rate is.
Well,
I know what the life expectancy is for people in the United States. For me, roughly, I can make a rough guess as to, barring some other consequences, how long I'm going to live. So of course I'm going to plan for the future. You plan for what you were optimistically hoping for. But I could get hit by a bus out here in New York where, by the way, it doesn't matter which direction you're walking down these streets, the wind is always in your face. Sorry.
That may be true. Look, I think life is lived in the moment. We look at memory as a reliable, although not very reliable, account of the past, but we trust it. Even though, again, if someone were to demand we substantiate that trust, we'd be a little hard-pressed to do it.
It would be
memory is very selective. Other people remember different things than you remember, and so on. And life has an unknown future stretching in front of us. Now, at all times in history, people are in huge ignorance about the world, large parts of which in the past were completely unknown. If I was Socrates walking in Athens in the 5th century BC, and I looked up in the sky, I'd see 7 stars, right? Now, if I was taking the rationalist position, I would say, well, I see 7 stars. I have no reason to believe that there are any more stars in the sky. And
just for clarity.
Yes.
Are you saying this is remotely accurate, or is this just an example? Because anybody who thinks that back then people only saw 7 stars, I got problems with.
No, fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. I'm using the limited radius of our empirical knowledge.
I knew that. Just for your benefit, it's an analogy. Yeah,
right.
You got it.
And you know so the ancients knew the Earth is round and so on. But the point here is that you have this limited body of data. But if you really reflect on the data, and you also reflect on yourself, right away you see, hey, I'm Socrates. I've never moved 5 miles away from the place I was born. I don't even know how big the Earth is. There could very well be a whole bunch of other stars out there, and just because I have not 1 ounce of empirical evidence for them, I can't be close to them or declare them out of bounds or declare that my whole life is to be lived without regard to that possibility. Well, because it's a very real possibility.
So let's say you and I both lived on this particular plot of land in New York our entire lives, and we had only ever seen 7 stars.
Right.
I'm not ruling out the possibility that there are 7 other stars. I'm
right?
dealing with people who are saying there are more than 7 stars and they can provide no evidence for it.
Right, but let's just say that those people who say that there are more than 7 stars, right, have the following type of reason for saying that. They say, first of all, let's just say that we're part of a natural universe, right? This is Kant's the starry heavens above. And they also know that I can't see very far, so because I only see 7 stars and I know that I can't even see a guy who walks over the horizon, I probably think there are a whole bunch of other stars that I just can't see because my eye only goes that far. Would that be an irrational reason to believe in more stars even though I only see 7?
Yes.
It would be irrational, according to you.
So, while you can come up with that as a justification, the reason that it seems like I'm talking within your analogy of
within my analogy,
we've only ever seen 7 stars. That is not so. We have deductive reasoning, and then we have inferences, which is basically where science operates, and then there's abductive reasons. And abductive is going to be the weakest, and abductive is going to be arguing towards the best explanation. And in that case, we need candidate explanations. What you're talking about is an inference that seems intuitive but has no evidence to actually support it.
It does.
The fact that I can only see so far should guide my brain to say I should not be reaching conclusions about what is beyond my ability to see.
Okay, so let's take, for example, you've seen a certain number of dogs in your life, correct?
Yeah, tons of them. She
Okay.
stops at every one.
Right. Above and beyond that, you haven't seen other dogs that are outside the radius of your empirical experience, true?
Correct.
Do you believe that there are other dogs other than the ones you've seen?
I have evidence of other dogs on Earth.
What's that evidence?
I've seen video footage. I have.
Okay,
met
but
people
let's
in
just say the
different-
video footage, let's count those among the dogs you've seen. What about the dogs you haven't seen?
Sure.
You believe they exist?
On Earth, yes, but if you tell me that I should then believe that there are dogs on Saturn, that's the level of thing we're talking about.
No,
here.
it's not. It's not. Absolutely not. See, this is the heart of the matter. This is the heart of the matter. Because according to you, religious people believe that there is a God who, like in ancient Greece, inhabits the natural world that's living on another planet. And so your reasoning is at the level of the cosmonauts who go up into the sky and go, no God up here, therefore God doesn't exist.
No, that's not it.
Well, you just said that I'm proclaiming a dog on Saturn.
Yes.
And I'm saying that's not what I'm doing at all.
So if I can only see 7 stars, there is a weak inference that there may be more stars, but to believe there actually are more stars isn't yet justified by the evidence. The dog example on Earth, even though I have not experienced every dog, I can actually do pretty much a rough estimate of dog by searching through data on how much dog food we sell, how many people buy Kong things for their dogs, how many Pets R Us are scattered around the world. There's all sorts of data that get to this thing where now it is a strong inference that there is a dog in China that I have never met and will never meet. Do I believe that that's the case? Yes, because that's where the data point to. To go beyond what the data show,
Okay.
to say that just because I know that I have a limit to my vision and I can see 7 stars, therefore I believe there are more, that is to go beyond what the data presents. You could, though, invent a telescope and improve your vision and get new data, which is exactly what we did to discover that we don't just live in the one and only galaxy and that the Earth isn't the center of the universe. Once we got that data, we began to have a better understanding of it. There are things like the Higgs boson, for example, which are a part of theoretical physics that we didn't have physical, empirical evidence for, but that the math pointed to. I'm not in any way denying that math is good data, which is one of the reasons why, well, all right, I won't go there yet because we're still on.
Well, I mean, here we are on common ground. If you're talking about science, if you're talking about quantum physics, if you're talking about relativity, if you're talking about the Big Bang, if you're talking about evolution, we have nothing to argue about. I'm on board with you 100%.
Hang on, you included science in that.
Science, yes. I'm on board
Does that
with
include climate change science?
climate change is, at least in the public sense it's understood, in no way science.
Okay, we'll probably get back to that after we're done.
We can come back to that, but it is in no way science.
I'm not a climate scientist.
No,
so it's,
I mean, I am on board 100% with the science of the greenhouse effect. When people say 97% of scientists, and you actually look at what 97% of scientists believe, they believe in the greenhouse effect. And the greenhouse effect is simply basically saying the release of carbon into the atmosphere warms the atmosphere. You'll get no disagreement from me on that. Now, there are several other propositions that are married to that, I think smuggled under the carpet, things like human beings are the primary cause of these differences. Second of all, the best way to tackle them is to change ultimately the temperature of the earth in various ways that we could try to affect through human behavior.
So your objection is we will get back to God like right after this. I don't know how far apart we are, and I have no expertise there, but it seems that your objection is primarily about how much are we the cause, what can we potentially do about it, what are the potential solutions, less so than what's happening.
Well, I mean, look, yeah, normally if I walk out and it's really hot, there are two possibilities. One is I can try to change the outdoor temperature, right? The other is I can take off my jacket. Those are two ways to respond to the same phenomenon.
Unless you're a polar bear.
Unless you're a polar bear. Now, there's a woman who counts the number of polar bears on the earth. And she has nothing to do with climate change. She did a report a couple of years ago saying there are more polar bears walking on the earth than ever. The polar bear population has multiplied. Now, right away she finds herself in controversy. Why? Not because her counting is wrong. It's difficult to count polar bears, admittedly, but she's the best one doing it in the world. But the reason she's controversial is it's not supposed to be the case. The glaciers are supposed to be melting, the habitat's changing, the polar bears disappearing. So the very fact that there are all these polar bears thriving and running around is like a major embarrassment. And so you have to dump on her and attack her. But even though she's giving you a valuable piece of data, scientific data, that bears upon the truth of this hypothesis. The hypothesis is that the Earth is getting hotter. Now think of it. The Earth is getting hotter by a degree or so Celsius over 100 years. And this is measured by things, in effect, putting thermometers in the ocean, which depend upon how far the thermometers are from the coastline, what the level of the ocean is at the... And these measurements are then modeled, in other words, put into computer programs to generate conclusions which ultimately have massive implications for the world economy. So what I'm getting at is, there are people who are asking us to change our way of life because of a 1-degree move in the climate. Now, my view on climate change is this. I watch the people who say this to see how serious they are about it. The very people who say this.
There's your mistake.
Well, for example, I look at Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg owns, I believe, 11 homes.
Can we stop looking at Mike Bloomberg? Because
well,
those ads are everywhere. Like I got to Times Square and it's like right there. Every time turn up Mike Bloomberg.
But I'm just saying, here's a guy who says it's going to be a priority for him as president. And I would say, really, if you have 11 homes, shouldn't you go down to 7? Well, if you really thought that your carbon imprint is a little too big.
I would completely agree with you there, but Mike's hypocrisy isn't really relevant to what the data show.
Are we talking about the hypocrisy of everybody? Because...
No, I'm talking about what the data show.
Okay, here's the data. Everyone can see this data, okay? Now, the Obamas, who are major apostles of this data, just bought a $12 million house right on the ocean, right on the water in Martha's Vineyard.
Okay.
These are the same people who are saying that in 12 years or 10 years, Miami will be engulfed by the ocean. The oceans are going to rise and swamp coastal properties, right? And my point is not just that the Obamas are hypocrites. That would be one small piece of data by itself. Here's my point. If the data is believed, if it's plausible, if it's even probable, if there's even a 50% chance that that would be the case, real estate properties worldwide on the coast would plummet. On the inland would rise. But the fact that that's not happening anywhere to my knowledge tells me this. Real estate agents know it's bullshit. Buyers know it's bullshit. Sellers know it's bullshit. Everybody knows it's bullshit.
Curiously, all those people have no scientific foundation to assess the data. Maybe,
wait, hold on.
Maybe those people are buying
on.
those because they know we're screwed and they only got a few years left to spend their millions. Might as well enjoy it on the coast.
Really? That's what you think?
When I'm evaluating this, and first of all, I definitely want to get back to the God thing. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not going to pretend any expertise, and there are areas of this where you and I are going to be in agreement. But when I'm trying to figure out whether or not something is real, I'm looking at the science and what the experts have to say, and you're looking at whether or not the Obamas are hypocrites, or whether Bloomberg's a hypocrite.
No.
That is not a sound epistemology to determine whether or not the climate is Okay.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the climate scientists are, and I think this is more true of this branch of science than it is generically true, they're highly interested observers of this phenomenon. Climate science is a massively funded enterprise. It gets gigantic dollars, and the gigantic dollars are aimed at finding a predetermined conclusion. I don't think you're innocent of the idea that researchers get huge grants. Take researchers who get huge grants from pharmaceutical companies. Take researchers
Except
who
this is bull.
This is bull.
Yes, because now the bulk of the world has at least, let's assume that the climate change stuff is BS. The bulk of the world is bought into it and are making efforts to change things, to change the way we live our lives, mostly so we can have a life. But now, wouldn't there be more money in the people who are actually going out to debunk this? This is the sort of conspiracy level thinking that people raise about science all the time. Oh, the money is leading them towards this conclusion. There's money in anything that you can demonstrate to be true. This is why I don't buy into the big pharma conspiracy stuff of trying to keep us sick, et cetera.
Okay.
Because there's money in a cure, there's money in new diseases, there's money in this, there's money in that, there's money.
Where's the money in debunking it? Let's say I have charts right here, and I show you the whole thing is BS. Who's going to pay me?
All those people buying coastal properties that you think are hypocrites.
Why would they pay me?
Because now, if you can demonstrate that it's BS, now their property values go up even more because now...
That just means they'll give the money to the real estate agents and to the buyers, but how are they going to fund me? How do I benefit?
You're suggesting that people will fund people to do research towards a foregone conclusion that benefits them, unless it's the foregone conclusion that benefits them that I mentioned.
No, I'm saying that it's simple common sense that when there is a proposition that leads to certain climate change is a huge industry. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You look like a guy like Al Gore. Al Gore's been a government servant his whole life. Do you realize Al Gore has a net worth of $200 million? How did he get $200 million? He got $200 million through climate change. Okay, it's a very profitable business.
Okay.
The debunkers of climate change are sitting in obscure research institutions collecting a $55,000 salary.
Which I would argue is an ad hominem fallacy that says nothing about whether or not the data...
No, it's not. No, it's not ad hominem fallacy.
It is.
It's pointing to the fact that research is not disinterested. That's not an ad hominem
Al Gore's
point.
not doing research. The fact that he can profit off something is independent from what researchers are finding out. You don't get to shame researchers because they made some damn money.
But I'm saying the researchers profit in a huge way too. Look at climate scientists and look at the money that goes into the
I will investigate how much climate science.
But when you said something else as well, which I think reflects a lack of understanding of markets, which is you said the real estate agents, the stock market, the real estate appraisals, those people are not scientists, right? Those people may not be scientists, but they are in a business where they put their money where their mouth is.
Yes.
Right? So in other words, it's one thing for me to say, I'm running for president and the earth is getting hotter. It's another thing for me to say, you know what, I'm living in this house on the ocean, it's $1 million, it's going to be worthless in 12 years, I should sell it to Dinesh for $100,000. Because it's literally going to be worth zero.
The fact that they don't necessarily believe that doesn't say anything. An individual's belief about what they think is going to happen with respect to climate change says nothing about what the data show with respect to climate change. You're talking about how convinced people are. You might as well be running around claiming, and to get back to the God thing, because we still got the supernatural and the afterlife and the origin of the universe. This argument is essentially the same as saying, look at how many people believe it and how strongly they believe it and how some of them are willing to sacrifice their lives for this. That must mean it's true. No, that gets to what humans do or don't believe, which is why your objection about hypocrisy is one that I share. The fact that there may be hypocrites, or maybe they're just looking at it and saying, hey, I got this money, I'll do this, we'll see what happens. Maybe it will change, maybe it won't.
Here's the
That's
problem.
all irrelevant to what the actual fact of the matter is with regard to climate change or God.
Well, let's focus on climate change for a second. We'll turn to God in a moment. All I'm trying to say is that here is an issue that is transporting itself into the domain of public policy. Mm-hmm. So it's not an issue of pure science. This is not like, was Einstein right that E equals mc square, and we can send somebody to go look at an eclipse and verify verify that Einstein's prediction was true. That's an argument in the domain of pure science. In the climate change argument, it's going to have to come into the public domain because we're asked to make decisions like don't use plastic straws and change.
I agree.
Right.
And but now we've moved from what the data show about what is happening to what we should do about it. And there, I think there's plenty of room for disagreement, discussion, everything else.
That's where the disagreement's occurring. It's not occurring over, if you're telling me that the Earth has warmed by 1 degree over the last 100 years, I grant that to you. I say, what have you really shown me so far? Very little. Very little.
Sure.
Okay.
But neither of us are climate scientists.
Exactly, and fair enough.
And you'll be right.
And these are the same, by the way, these are the same climate scientists who told us, the same climate scientists who told us in the 70s and 80s that the Earth was
really?
cooling. Yes.
The same guys in the 70s?
Well, I mean, it's...
Are they like 84 now?
Well, okay, fair enough.
All right.
Fair enough. So you're telling me now that even though we're measuring the same duration, i.e. not 1980 to now, but let's just take, for example, the Earth from 1900 to 1980. You're telling me that there's a whole group of scientists at top universities. There's a book by Lowell Ponty in the 70s called The Cooling. All the apocalyptic rhetoric of today is duplicated in that book with the sole exception that the Earth is cooling. It's not getting hotter, it's getting colder. Global cooling. In fact, I think this is the root of the substitutionary phrase climate change, because the climate somewhere, in some way, is always changing. But the point is this, that all these measurements from 1980 going back the previous 80 years show a cooling trend. So you're telling me that they were wrong, and the new guys coming in...
I'm not telling you anything.
Well, I'm just saying that you're accepting now that a new bunch of guys will come in measuring the same phenomenon, right? Maybe using better instruments.
That's how science gets better, yeah.
Yes, but it gets better by and large by greater precision. Not by basically saying that up is down and down is up.
Sure, but if you find, so there's, and I have no specific expertise, hey, fly, in this particular, the thing is, this is the, science got it wrong before, so it likely has it wrong again, which is a fallacy in itself. Because the fact that the only thing in the entire...
let's probe that fallacy. Why is it a fallacy?
Because the past doesn't necessitate the future.
Right.
And the fact that something, we discovered that science was wrong about something doesn't mean that our new discovery is wrong or as likely to be wrong or anything in the neighborhood. Science is the single most consistently reliable method for accurately understanding the world.
The natural world.
And the only thing that has ever come along to correct a flawed finding in science is more and better science, not religion, not hypocrisy, not what's the market doing.
But that's silly because that's, okay, that would be like me saying science is greater than philosophy because scientific findings are cumulative and they have gotten more precise and accurate about the natural world, whereas in philosophy we haven't advanced all that far past Plato. Okay,
I'll buy that.
You'll buy that?
So, philosophy, which I love, I'm a philosophy geek, especially when it comes to epistemology. But I don't think what have we done on epistemology since, I'll just stick with Hume. Once you have the foundations of thought, there's not much left to explore there. Once you have identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, once you have the foundations of a syllogism, once you have the foundations of set theory and Venn diagram, and you've got your epistemology, now that's when science can say, now we can tell when we're justified in accepting something and when we're not, and to what extent. And so science then does this inferential testing to build a model that is our best example of the universe, and it is tentative and subject to revision. That's what science doesn't make proclamations about truth.
Yeah, but I think
But scientists do. So if there's a climate scientist out there that says, the truth is this, that's not science. That's preaching on behalf of science. What they should be saying is the data show this, here's the model, this is the extrapolation of this model, this is our best understanding and best estimate for what's going to happen in the future. So that they're making decisions like I am about my future based on actual data and what we, and not just what we hope happens.
Well, I think it was Wittgenstein who said that even if all possible scientific questions could be solved, the most important human questions would still be on the table. Now, the importance of that is this. I think your awarding a sort of prize to science based upon a stacked deck. You're defining scientific truth as somehow superior, and you're declaring that on that basis, arguing inside the bubble of science, science comes out first prize. And according to you, philosophy, because it's dealing with enduring human, you may say, eternal questions like what is good, what is right, how do you tell right from wrong, not to mention questions like how do we know what we know.
That's the one I went with.
Yeah, or to pursue, here's Immanuel Kant. You asked who went past Hume. I would say Kant did. You ask questions like, when I look at something in space,
okay,
is the space in the world, or is the space a mode of my perception? Is time something out there in the world? Just think about it. Time is this thing, this object with no weight.
Time isn't an object.
Well,
time is an abstraction.
Is an abstraction. And abstractions, by and large, live in our mind.
Yes.
So Kant's point is that space and time are dimensions of they are things that the mind brings to experience. They are not something out there in the world. Now, I'm not trying to resolve that issue. Okay, I don't think either of us is going to top Kant on this one in the next 30 seconds. All I'm trying to say is that to argue that this kind of a question is somehow either settled or unimportant because there is no way of sort of addressing it in a scientific sense, I think reflects a certain narrowness of perspective about the wide range of human knowledge, the wide range of disciplines, from history to psychology.
If I had said anything remotely like that, but I didn't.
Well, you gave a little kind of science comes first, and that's what I was responding to.
Science is the most consistently reliable method of accurately understanding the universe. The cosmos, the natural world.
The natural world, perfect, exact. But we live in a world where we are in a natural world to be sure, right? But we are anomalous objects in that natural world, right? First of all, we are conscious of our own existence. We are conscious that here we are in the world observing the world. Okay. That makes us different from most of the world. True?
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as I can tell.
Yeah, and as far as we can tell, even in the living world and in the animal kingdom, we are anomalous in that we not only have consciousness, but we have self-consciousness. True?
Some of us.
Okay. Okay, and to push it further, coming back a little bit to Kant here as well, Kant says, I'm amazed by the starry heavens, and then I'm equally amazed by the moral law within me. So now we come to another thing which is worth mentioning, which is, well, Adam Smith's phrase for it was the impartial spectator, which is, to quote Adam Smith, there is this man within the breast, sort of another guy, as Smith envisioned him, inside of us that is clearly not us, because this guy, let's call him a guy, is a bit of a nuisance. This guy...
How did we reach the conclusion that it's not us? First of all, I'm not going to concede that there's a man in here or that he's not me.
Well, no, but the only point I'm trying to make in a roundabout way is that as humans, we are inherently moral beings. Morality is part of the equipment of being human, and in fact, it's a necessary part. In our criminal law, for example, if somebody is considered not to know the difference between right and wrong, we don't even hold them accountable for their actions. Which is to say, we consider morality...
That's not true.
That's not true?
Yeah.
If somebody, let's say, for example, some guy is so insane that he thinks he's Napoleon, and he goes out and kills somebody else.
We still hold them responsible for their actions. We just have graduated to a point where we are killing fewer people who are of diminished mental capacity, thankfully, but we are also committing people to institutions for their own benefits. But it's not like you just walk in and say, blameless.
Well, John Hinckley was in an institution for shooting the President of the United States, and he's out. So he was...
Is he better? Has he shot anybody else?
He hasn't shot anybody else, but my point is he was held not responsible for that act in a criminal sense.
That is a technical definition within the law. He was still held responsible.
No,
okay. It's not like we let them get away with it.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if somebody has no moral comprehension whatsoever, we basically call them a psychopath or a sociopath. And all I'm trying to say is that that's a way of saying that you are outside the human community because the normal moral equipment that the rest of us have that comes into play.
So just for clarity, you're suggesting that those individuals, and I would stay away from diagnostic terms normally, but psychopaths, sociopaths, they don't have that inner man. That
I'm saying if society makes a determination that someone is, in a sense, a psychopath or a sociopath, they are considered, in a sense, outside the normal moral community of human beings, not accountable to the same.
So for clarity, we start off with this, we all have this, and now we've identified a group of people who don't have it.
And I'm saying that those people who don't have it, or at least have somehow, I'm not saying they weren't born with it. I'm saying I agree. I do think that our moral equipment, like our other equipment, can be damaged. It can be destroyed. It can be squelched. It can be brutalized. So yeah, let's assume that there's somebody who's gone through whatever experiences that have caused them to be morally anesthetized.
Okay.
And so, for example, they could bring in a little dog right here and joyfully stomp on it as the audience gasps in horror. Or if you want a more mixed reaction, a cat. The point I'm trying to make, however, is that...
Sorry, Beth.
The point I'm trying to make is just this, that we, in trying to understand the cosmos, we don't just understand the physical world, which is the domain of science, I agree.
Sure.
But I'm saying we have to understand ourselves.
I couldn't agree more that we should understand ourselves, and I think that one of the biggest problems is that there are a number of assumptions that the biggest problem humans make is probably asking the wrong questions, like, what's the purpose of my life? As if it was externally imposed and extant as a real thing that you could discover, rather than I make my own meaning and purpose in life. But when we're talking about this moral being, I would presume...
Wait, I mean, you just made an absolutely ridiculous statement, so
good.
I have to pause a little bit here, because I'm sort of
That's fine,
grasping
you make
this.
a ridiculous statement,
well,
and I'll be able to
to
do the same thing, yeah.
According to you, we don't have a life purpose. I mean, let's think about it. First of all, almost all of us are, in some sense, trying to discover what the purpose of our life is, right? And there are huge industries devoted to this. There are talk shows devoted to this. It's a quest that just about all of us, probably most of us in the audience, are on. And you're declaring at the outset that it is a quest, according to you, that has no answer, or at least has no external answer.
No, it is a quest that I don't see any reason to think that there is an externally imposed purpose. The fact that you might desire there to be a God, a divine, or a universe-imposed purpose doesn't mean there is one. The fact that humans quest for things doesn't mean that the answer is there, or doesn't mean that the answer they hope for is there.
Of course not. So no one is saying that the wish to have a purpose is enough. No, I'm not even saying that the universe is somehow...
What is our purpose?
Well, I would say this, that I think in life, we are always asking this question. Am I, Dinesh, living the best life that I can live? In other words, is the life I'm living now somehow off track, inauthentic? Is there, when I say something, there's me saying it, but is there a better me that would have said something different? In other words...
I agree.
Okay, so, in other words, my quest to find not only the choices I make, but the choices I ought to make is completely valid. True? So
there's a contextual thing. This is where we got with the labels and how we end up looking at this.
Yeah.
My view is that my life has whatever meaning and purpose I give it.
Okay.
The notion that I should be looking for some externally imposed purpose is not only do I not have a good reason to think that there is such a purpose or that there would be or could be.
And you're saying, but whatever answer you give to that question of let's take, what is the purpose of Matt's life? And you're saying whatever answer you give is valid.
Yes, because if in fact there is some God who has a purpose for my life, I don't care what he thinks the purpose of my life should be. My life is mine.
Okay, let's explore that. Let's just say that you were to come here and announce to this audience, the purpose of my life, Matt, is to, and I realize this is a difficult example, I was going to say to count the hairs on my head. This doesn't really work in your case.
There are hairs here on my head.
Right, there you go.
This is my head.
There you go. Okay, but you said that's what I live for. Every day I wake up and I spend a few hours a day, at least in the time I'm not working or eating, counting the hairs on my beard.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I would submit that everybody here would say, Matt, you know what? I don't think you're living your best life, pal. You know, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, but it's kind of pointless.
Can you show that this isn't the purpose of my life? That there is some other purpose?
Well, yes, I would. I mean, I think I could make arguments to that effect.
Okay.
Let's pursue the example even further, make it more ridiculous so we can see how obvious it is. Let's just say, for example, and yeah, I don't mean to be going into the trans territory, but I'm going to go there a little bit. Let's say I were to say, I identify as a toad.
Okay.
Okay? And so what I do is I get up in the morning and I start jumping around like a toad. And for a while, people go, hey, that guy's an eccentric, man. What the hell is he doing? And then I go, listen, it's not just up to me. I'm getting a little annoyed that there are all these haters out there who don't respect my identity as a toad. Disney won't cast me in toad races in their movies. I'm denied rights under the Constitution. All these people look down on me and make jokes when I come, jumping by, okay? So, and my point is not that I've decided to become a toad. My point is I've always been a toad. I'm just a toad in a human body. Okay, now, and I seriously press this. You would come to me, I think, and say, Dinesh, you are a member of Homo sapiens. You're not actually a toad. This purpose of your life that you have ascribed to yourself is based on some deep psychological disorders. You have very poor self-perception of who you are as a human being. And who you are as a human being is you're a son, you're a brother, you're a graduate of an Ivy League college, and you make movies. Go do those things and find a better, a higher purpose in life than jumping around in a dirty pond.
You think that's what I would come to you and say?
I hope so. Unless you... I hope so. You may...
No.
You might come join me.
Because first of all, I'm not a busybody who worries about what other people do and how they feel and what their views are.
It's not.
But also,
that's not.
But also, I try to avoid fallacious arguments. And in fact, you are a Homo sapien, but Homo sapiens include multiple different genders, and the fact that someone's gender identity doesn't match what you think it should be is none of your damn business.
Well, hold on. Okay. So, right up to this point, you've been invoking science, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly, science is trumped by psychology.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes, because according to you, now your gender is not a fact in the natural world.
Correct.
Your gender...
Your genetic sex and what your chromosomes are, those are facts, but your gender is a social construct. This is the difference between, let's say, someone who's genetically male and someone who's genetically female. Okay. Someone who has XX or XY chromosomes. And by the way, there are more than two of those because there's all sorts of chromosomal abnormalities. There are intersex people. The number of people who are born intersexed every year would shock most people because they just don't think that this sort of thing happens. However, that is about what your chromosomes are, what genetic predisposition you have. But it doesn't talk about what your state of mind is, what sort of self-perception you have. And so in addition to genetic sex, we also have gender, which actually falls into a number of different categories. So my apologies to all of my trans friends for the things that I'm about to get slightly wrong. There's a difference between gender identity and gender expression. And the gender identity is the gender that you associate with. But the reason I say these are social constructs is because what is a man? What makes a man a manly man? Well, you have the machismo aspect of the brawny and blah, blah, but is someone who is weaker and more effeminate somehow less of a man? This is why this is a social construct, because it has to do with what roles we as a society put on it, which is why 150 years ago, pink was for boys and blue was for girls, and now it has reversed, although I would go with black for everybody. But the thing is, At the end of the day, what I would say to you, if you were hopping around like a frog, is I would ask you how you're doing. I would ask you how you feel. And if you're able to communicate to me that you identify as a frog, I'm not going to be running around saying, oh my gosh, let me fix this. It's when there's a demonstration that what you're doing may be something that society should care about, that is going to result in some sort of self-harm or a problem for your life. In other words, I'm okay with living and let living, but as long as my trans friends are committing suicide at an inordinate rate and are being murdered left and right because there are bigots who think that whatever your chromosomes are or whatever particular genitalia you might have dangling is the one thing that matters, as long as a friend of mine well, not an actual friend of mine, but someone in Puerto Rico the other night was murdered for using the bathroom that they associate with, when bathrooms are for peeing and pooping and hopefully washing your hands when you're done. What people are doing to try to suggest that you can't be who you are is absolutely repugnant, and it is busybody. There's nothing anti-science about this. It is psychology. And even if we were to say, and I'm not saying this, so before, I'm saying this because this comes up. Even if you were to say, this is all gender dysphoria and it's mental illness and these people aren't what they think they are, what science has to say so far, based on what we've explored and discovered within these individuals, is that being supportive, encouraging, and allowing them to transition is the single best path to them living the life they want to live and surviving. And until that changes, I will absolutely support what the data show is the best way to encourage trans people.
So what I think you've done here is change the topic. The topic was...
I'm pretty sure you said trans before I did.
I did, but I did by analogy. The point I was trying to make was, is there such a thing as male and female, right?
Really? Is that the point you were trying to make?
It was, because
we got
what
to this
you
from
did
somewhere
was
else.
you took the category of male, which actually is a scientific category. It's like life is a scientific
I made a
category.
distinction between male, female, and man, woman.
Right, and then what you did is you introduced a new concept, which I wasn't introducing, of manliness. And I agree, manliness, which is to say the cultural accoutrement of being a man, let's just say, for example, smoking a cigar or growing a mustache and hanging out at a club, that is manliness. And I agree that that is a social construct. I would argue it's a social construct by and large in accordance with nature, because culture and society develops in congruence with a given human creature. Okay, so
Nobody's suggesting that the roles don't have a historical perspective. I mean,
not historical, biological.
well, sure.
Gender is not a historical concept, it's a biological concept.
When I say historical, I was not denying biology. I'm saying that because of certain biological things, it sets up norms of these are the hunter-gatherers, these are the ones that are going to go out and kill, these are the ones that are nursing children, et cetera else. Those norms are constructs of our head. There's nothing wrong with a stay-at-home dad. There's nothing wrong with a woman working. There's nothing wrong with a woman earning as much as a man makes for doing the same work.
Let's look at what we are arguing about.
Okay.
So in the civil rights laws of the 1960s, we had the principle of color blindness, which is to say equal rights under the law. The law, let's say, should not pay attention to race. I realize this is complex with affirmative act. Let's leave it aside. Let's just say that the basic principle of the civil rights laws is that race is the painted face. I think that was Morris Dees' phrase from the 60s. And therefore, the law should not take it into account. That was the general norm. Now, right away, when sex was added to race in the Civil Rights Act, there was a bit of a problem, which is to say that men and women are very different, particularly in certain areas on average. They're not different in every individual case. So, for example, men are stronger than women. Men are taller than women. Now, you can't refute that by saying, well, here's Sally, she's 6'3", and here's Fred, he's 5'4".
I understand.
Right.
We're talking
because we're talking about in general.
Yeah, norms.
But the normative conclusion from that simple biological fact is we established something that was abhorrent in the area of race. Let's call it separate but equal. Separate but equal was the hated doctrine of segregation, right?
Yeah.
Different water fountains. But we have separate but equal, for example, in men's and women's sports. In Wimbledon, the men play the men, the women play the women. We did that because we recognize that gender is not the same as race. Gender is not the painted face. Men are in fact stronger than women, and they can hit the ball harder on the tennis court, and therefore Martina Navratilova gets to play Chris Evert, and Pete Sampras gets to play Andre Agassi. So our laws, our norms, are based upon this biological, irreducible fact. The norms are a social construct, but they're a social construct, you may say, in obedience to biology. Now, what you're saying is, I take it, that Pete Sampras, or take it, Pete Sampras can say, well, I came in, I was the runner-up in Wimbledon. Next year, I'm going to enter the women's division because I identify as a woman. Because after all, hold on, gender is a social construct. This is ridiculous? This is going on all over the country right now.
Your example is ridiculous.
Why is it ridiculous?
First of all, it's sports, and sports ball is ridiculous. But
what?
No, I'm sorry. That was a joke for somebody else.
Okay.
My sincere apologies, because I should be.
I'm not a devotee of sports, but I'm not.
This isn't about what the law is. My view on sports, by the way, and many sports organizations have already dealt with this sort of thing, dealing with individuals who are transitioning and studying the science of it at various hormonal levels and things like that. And we're still in the fledgling process of getting this sorted. I think that there shouldn't be any gender restrictions on something. If somebody, we should just have, these are the categories, like a tier A, tier B, tier C, tier D, and you compete at whatever level you can compete at. That way, people who are, whether they're women, men, or neither, whether they're, whatever their identity is, they compete at this level. I am a big fan, I play a lot of pool and snooker. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at the statistics over history, generally speaking, in that particular discipline, women can't compete as well as the men. That's just what the data show from the past. However, there should be no reason why anyone, whether they are a woman under your criteria or a woman under their own, shouldn't be able to compete against anybody else they want if they can play at that level. And so I don't care for gender divisions along sports. I think sports, because it's a physical test, should be divided up on physical characteristics, irrespective of what gender somebody identifies with or expresses with. To go to the sports thing, the reason I say it's ridiculous is, yeah, we're working out these things, but the world doesn't turn, well, all right, sports makes a lot of money, no denying that. We're talking about the law and how it treats people, and we're also talking about human beings and how we treat people.
Right.
So if you saw me walk into a women's bathroom, what would your reaction be? It's clearly, we're at a restaurant, it's marked women's, and I walk in. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't know what my take on it. I can give you my wife's take on it.
Well,
You would feel very uncomfortable if you sprang your testicles in a women's bathroom, as would most of the other women
if I
in that bathroom.
sprang my testicles,
Yeah. Most women, I think,
aren't you assuming I have testicles?
I realize that may be a conjecture.